The night the winds changed, Aegon sat beneath the cracked lintel of a half-ruined tower outside Storm's End with his cloak unfastened and his sword across his knees, feeling the air grow wet and heavy as breath. Down in the camp, the cooking fires guttered and hissed when spray came on a stronger gust, and the horses shifted their weight and rolled their eyes toward the sea they could only smell. The drums of the sea were constant, thud and fall against the cliff, and every now and then a louder drumbeat came, making the stones underfoot tremble with a sound that was said to be the god's anger trapped inside the old castle walls. He had heard men tell that tale in 3 accents now: the slow drawl of a marcher knight with his arm in a sling, the salt-bitten croak of a fisher lad pressed into service as a runner, the round vowels of a wine seller who put a neckerchief over his nose when he crossed the trench that led to the middens. Each had smiled a bit as he said it, as if the tale made him braver. He had listened and let it be their courage, not his. He was thinking of the stones. He was thinking that a wall like Storm's End was not a thing that had been built in a single breath or a single rage, not even by a man who had defied sea and sky. This had been raised by a stubbornness that did not flame but smoldered. He found that he admired that, not a fury that spent itself upon the first unyielding surface, but a quiet refusal to stop. The storm had not stopped the Durandons. The storm would not stop him. The thought gave him no joy and no grief. It was simply true, and truths were stones one could lean against when men and winds shifted. Orys had gone down to the shoreline to oversee the landing boats, for even besiegers required food. Visenya, never sleeping long, had taken 2 of the guard and gone the rounds of the pickets to see what spikes were dulled and what eyes most red. Rhaenys had wrapped herself in oilskin and gone up slope to the ledge where mare axes liked to lie when the wind blew from the east, where she would sing to the dragon under her breath, soft and tuneless, the way a woman sang to a new babe. Each knew their portion, and each did it without asking him. He thought about that too. He was used to men who wanted his face on their choices, so if the choice soured, they could have his blame alongside their regret. He had not flown today. Balerion slept far out on the black beach where the pebbles were like scales and the waves were like claws. When a dragon slept, the sea did not come nearer. The sea had its pride, and the dragon had his. It was an old day for both of them. He had watched the curve of Balerion's ribs rise and fall, the furnace behind that hard skin easing with each breath, and he had felt a strange kinship with a creature older than the memory of man. A kinship that had little to do with blood and everything to do with the long wait of patience. A torch was coming, weaving between the tents, then steadying. The cloth round it slapped and snapped in the wind like a tongue. Orys' broad outline resolved out of glare and shadow, shoulders hunched against the spray, hair tied back and heavy. He came without haste, and when he reached the ruined tower, he did not speak but rested his hand on the stone Aegon had touched. They stood in silence like that a little while, listening to the thud and fall. "Food enough?" Orys said at last. "The lamb is thin," and the men grumbled when they saw the bones. But grumbling is not hunger, and I have found more men who are fishers than I thought. Nets will go out at slack tide. "Good," Aegon said. "There's worse news," Orys added, and that had the taste of a brother's frankness. "The south wall looks less manned than it was 3 nights ago, but I do not trust the look of a place in a storm. When the wind shifts again, we'll know." Aegon studied Orys' face in the wavering light. There was salt crusted in the creases at the corners of his mouth. He had not shaved in the days since the last assault, and his beard showed the same mixed darkness his hair did, softened at the cheekbones by copper exactly like the copper in Aegon's own hair when the light struck it right. No one had needed to tell him the old rumor. He had heard it before he had ever looked so closely for himself. It did not matter. He had felt Orys' shoulder beside his in that first boat out of Dragonstone, felt Balerion's heat on his ankles and Orys' laugh at his ear, and there had been a surety in that, the kind a boy knows in the way a man lifts him out of the surf with one hand and sets him on a rock. In their lives since, nothing had been given him to unlearn that surety. Rumor could live. Stone remained stone. "What worse news?" he asked. Orys flicked a glance toward the castle. "The raven." Rhaenys read the letter. "She asked that I bring it to you, but she did not want to see your face when you read it." Those were her words. "I will not see his face then," she said, and laughed, though it was not an easy laugh. And Visenya? She will see any face. She is steel. She told the messenger to eat, and then she questioned him till his food went cold. Aegon held out his hand. Orys reached inside his jerkin and drew out a crumpled parchment kept dry in an oiled sleeve. Melted wax clung to the fold. The seal that had left its sunburst impression had been pressed hard, and even in bad light Aegon saw that the wax had been touched by more hands than the messenger's. Men will press a finger into a king's seal, for the same reason they lay a hand upon a relic. He broke the wax and unfolded the letter. The script was a careful, rounded hand that tried too hard to be elegant and succeeded in becoming strained. The words themselves were simple, a petition for peace. The lords of the storm, or the fraction of them that had made common cause, begged leave to open one gate if terms were granted. They named terms: an amnesty for those who had borne arms against him, preservation of lands, and, buried in the last paragraph like a judgment he already knew he would not honor, the request that Argella, daughter of Argilac, be married as he saw fit, not by the hand of a conqueror's captain, but by the king's own will to a man of his choosing, that the dignity of her line might be saved from a petty cruelty. Aegon read the last twice more, and then once again, because he could not tell if what he felt as he read was anger or the ghost of some other thing, older and harder to name. He knew Orys was not reading over his shoulder. Orys would not. But he felt the closeness of the man, the smell of rain and leather and the faint iron of blood, and it tempered whatever that feeling was. "They beg to guide your charge," Orys said without being asked. "They beg to keep their heads attached to their shoulders," Aegon returned, the dryness of veil. "And the lady?" Orys asked, not hiding the word lady as an insult or wearing it as pity. "Your questions are always square," Aegon thought. "Square as bricks in a wall." "She is a prize to be bargained for, or she is a person to be met," Aegon said. "And I am thinking which it will be." Orys looked at him evenly. That steady look was the look of a man who had asked himself harder questions in worse weather. "Be quick in your thinking," he said, and in that there was no censure, only the rhythm of a long companionable habit. "The men will need to know by dawn if we break camp to appear busy at an assault, and Visenya will want to count the arrows twice if we do." "Send word that I accept a parley," Aegon said. "At dawn, I will require only that they open a small gate and allow 2 of mine to enter with me. The lady will attend." "They will hear that as a command," Orys said. "They will accept it as a mercy," Aegon replied. Orys' mouth tugged. Not a smile, that would have been too easy, but a small easing. He took the parchment without touching Aegon's fingers and turned away, the torch's cloth snapping, scattering sparks. Aegon remained under the broken lintel a long while after the torch had tilted out into the camp and the darkness had become what it had been. He listened to the thrum of the wind against stone, and then he listened for the subtle, low sound under it, a sound he had only begun to hear in these last months, when the waiting between battles was longer than the battles themselves. It was the sound of hope moving through men. It was a different sound than hunger, different from fear. It was like the answer to a question given without words. He stood there and let it fill him, not the hope itself, but the knowing that it existed. When he drew his cloak across his shoulders, it smelled of smoke and of the oil Visenya had rubbed into the leather so that the sea would not eat it. Dawn came as it often did on that coast, sudden and without ceremony. One instant the light was gray, the next it had the faint yellow of old bone. The rain had slackened, but the wind still came in gusts that pushed a man if he stood careless. The gate they opened for him was a postern off a narrow footway cut into the cliff, a path that stank of old guano and salt. It was hard to approach in a manner that would read as royal. He brought no banner. He wore no crown. He had Blackfire strapped and the plain steel of dragonmail under his dark tunic, and he went with Orys at his left and Withrow, silent Withrow, the best of the guard at seeing what did not wish to be seen, at his right. There were no courtesies at the door, no trumpets. There was a square of men in wet leather and steel, hands low on spears that were a little swollen with damp, and a man with a face like a boulder who stared and did not blink, and behind them a woman whose eyes did not move to meet his when he entered. She stood a step back from the line of guards, as if the space between them and her were a thing she could measure and own. Her hair was bound in a simple knot high on her head. It was black, but not empty black. When the wind took it and a strand pulled free, it showed the deep blue one sees inside coal when a flame is new beneath it. She wore a russet gown under a leather jerkin too large by a finger's width at the shoulders. It hung like borrowed armor. It was not filthy. Somebody had washed it, probably not 3 hours ago, in water that tasted of iron. One detail took him by the throat and would not let go. Her forearms were banded with wheels where rope had been. They were not the clean red yearnings of a light binding. They had been done and redone. Whoever had tied the rope had been rough or had been in a hurry, and when the ropes had been cut, they had been cut through, not untied. Someone had used a blade close to her skin. The edges of some wheels were peeled white, as if the top layer of skin had gone away when the rope did. She did not hide them. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbow, and her hands were bare despite the cold. The man with the boulder face cleared his throat. The sound was like gravel turned in a drum. "Your Grace," he said. He put no fear into the title, but he did not dress it up either. "I am Ser Gaillard Cannington, castellan to the late Argilac. May the old gods and the new judge him justly. This is the lady you requested." Aegon lifted his eyes to hers. She was not pretty. There was no sweetness to her mouth, and the line of her jaw was like a blade. She had been weeping at some point in the last day and had not been self-conscious about it. The skin around her eyes was swollen and raw, and when the wind off the sea found the edges of that rawness, she flinched the smallest amount. Her gaze was hard and steady, the gaze of a person who had faced humiliation and found within herself a small corner of ground that was not humiliation, and who was prepared to kill to keep it. "Lady Argella," he said. "Princess," she said, and there was no pettiness in the correction. "While I yet draw breath, I am my father's daughter, though breath is poor title." He said, "Princess," then. When he had been a boy of 12, he had gone to the highest balcony of Dragonstone with Visenya in a wind not much kinder than this one. She had taken the hair from her face with her knife. He had said, "You could have used your hand," and she had said, "My hand is less sharp than my knife." It had been lesson and provocation both. He thought of that now. "We are to parley," he said. "Your men have asked me for terms." "Ser Gaillard asked," she said, "first cut fast." "I did not, but..." And she stopped herself with a small lift of chin that he supposed in a gentler life would have been a habit his mother scolded as unseemly. "You did not," he agreed. "Yet here you are." Her lips thinned. "You required it. I am not fool enough to think I can refuse anything you require." "There is much you can refuse," he said. "If you do so, you must be ready to bear the cost and to pay it." "I have paid," she said, and her voice did not waver. "I was delivered to you unclothed, bound like a sow on a festival day, with the men who were sworn to protect me laughing like dogs when the sow squeals. They laugh less now, since Ser Gaillard had their lips broken on the edge of a bowl and their cheeks cut with the knife. You may have noted their silence. What would you exact that I have not yet given?" It was not easy, in the breath after such a speech, to say anything that might still be called a parley. He could feel Oris at his side, not moving, a stillness like his own. Wind combed a spray of cold over his face and into his hair. It made the lock on his cheek a weight, then nothing. "You may keep your name," he said. He did not raise his voice, but the men in the square who had been trying to breathe small took a larger breath. He heard it, a roughness in unison. "And the men who laughed shall be given to you for judgment, and I shall not alter your sentence. The houses who took you bound from your hall shall either be banished from the Stormlands or come and kneel. I will have no lords who do not know which way the knee bends." Gaillard Cannington, by some instinct, had moved his weight onto the balls of his feet. He looked suddenly lighter by 2 stone. Aegon did not look at him. "Those are the terms?" the woman asked. One of her hands had closed around the leather on her jerkin, just at the collar where it gaped by that finger's width. The knuckles were white. "For surrender? For life? They are the beginning of what I will do," he said. "For you." "For me," she said. She did not shape it like gratitude. It was as if she had touched the word to her tongue and found it bitter and humorless. "For the Stormlands," he added, "I am not a man to take a thing for nothing. You understand that? I take your oath and I give you mine. You will have your name. You will keep these walls. You will sit in their shadow and decide who eats and who hangs and who repairs the broken cistern where the water breeds fever. You will receive the men who come at last with their heads bowed, and you will sit your horse to ride out where the land looks like the back of a giant fish and the trees are all bent one way. That is what I offer. And this, I will marry you." He could feel the words fall into the air like stones dropped into the sea, one after the other, feeling their own weight vanishing, leaving only circles that moved outward and were sudden, cold, and intimate when they struck the shore. There was a moment in which no one moved, not even the gulls, though that was only an illusion of the attention inside each person there. Then Orys shifted his head a quarter turn, and Aegon saw the line of the man's throat tighten. And then, like a man who has ridden a skittish horse for so long that he has found a way to both give and take a measure at once, Orys bowed the smallest amount. The woman looked at him up and down quickly, as if to see where he meant to hide his joke. She found no place. He had meant no joke. He let her see that. "You have wives," she said after a time quietly. She did not blush. "I do," he said, "and I am no Dornish lady to be gladdened by a man's lax honor," she said, just as quietly, with no spite. "But what is honor where there is no breath left?" "I do not ask for gladness," he said, and that was the truest thing he had spoken in weeks. "I ask for steadiness. I have wives, and I love them each as they deserve, and they love me as I deserve or as I do not. But the storm eats any house that stands alone on a promontory. Better to build it into the rock. I offer you the dragon's rock. What you will build with it is yours to decide." Ser Gaillard made a small sound that might have been a swallow. The men in the square did not look at one another. They looked either at their boots or at the horizon, which was a line as stark as a blade's edge where the pale water met the pale sky, and they were set upon. She drew a breath. He heard the rattle in it, the residue of weeping. "You would have me your wife," she said, "not handfasted to a captain as the old vow allowed now and again in a siege, but wed in a sept with a septon's witness." "Yes," he said. He thought of fire on water and of the shape of Balerian's tail when it swept. He thought of Visenya's mouth when she tried and failed to hide her satisfaction at a hard bargain honestly struck. He thought of Rhaenys' laugh when the wind took her hair. He thought of Orys in the dark outside a hut smelling of fish and tar and the taste of a boy's first victory, which had been merely a fish too heavy on the line to reel in alone. He said, "In a sept, and with all the rights of the seven what they craft cannot deny." She narrowed her eyes. "You would have a Stormlander bride for love of the seven? I would have you for love of the Stormlands." There was a memory in her gaze then, and he knew it because it was the kind of memory that takes the body before the mind, can decide to house it. Her shoulders eased not very much, and her hands, those flayed and banded hands, loosened where they had been clenched. "You speak as if you were a king," she said, and the tiniest crookedness touched the corner of her mouth. "As if what you decide for a land must be what that land will be." He let that smile or not smile pass. "Will you do this?" he asked. He did not waste dignity on softness. The wind had no softness in it and needed none. "I will," she said, and then she added, "But I will set a price. I would be ashamed if you did not." "My men," she said, "those who betrayed me to you bound will feel my justice, not yours. Those who stood, whether wisely or not, shall not be turned out of their halls to starve. And this most of all, the stag shall not lose his crown. If my children live, they will bear both names." He nodded once. Done. That was all. She did not fall to her knees or attempt to embrace a stranger. She did not cry out curses against heaven or father, the one dead and the other indifferent. She inclined her head to him, low and steady, as if she were acknowledging a bargain struck over salt beef in a clean inn. When she raised it again, he saw that her eyes had lost that raw, swollen look. The skin was still red, It would be red until the wind stopped and tears had their way or else found no more water to draw. But the gaze with which she met his was like a thrown spear now, not a bare knife. "Then, your grace," she said, "you will give your orders and I will give mine." They opened the little gate wider. Aegon and Orys and Withrow went in, boots grating on old stone worn to a polish by salt and the passage of men. The wet smell was stronger inside. Storm's End kept its own breath, and it was the breath of long-held damp and the things men kept dry inside it, and the smoke of the meat that had saved lives there and saved them again. The sept was small, set within a bailey under a low parapet, as if it had learned to duck when the weather came. It had 7 narrow windows made of glass whose green and blue and smoky white came from the sea itself. When the sun struck them, it turned the floor into a patchwork of algae-lit glow. But today the light was the color of a pearl held too long in a closed fist. A thin, gray-haired man in a shabby robe stood at the altar and tried not to look astonished. His astonishment broke him open, though in odd places. His hands trembled when he poured oil onto the glass dish that caught it. He said the blessing for mercy twice when he meant to say the blessing for courage. Yet he did not falter entirely, and at the end he looked at Aegon with a defiance so modest it would have escaped notice if Aegon had not been what he was. Aegon decided the man would not be moved from that place when another man would have fled it. He had a use for such men. He had a use for many kinds of men. Visenya arrived when the Septon began the invocations. The wind may have been tugging her hair, but it lay smooth. Her sword hung against her hip and looked like a part of her body, not an addition to it. She watched with that sidewise intensity she had even when she looked straight on, as though she never truly looked right at a thing lest she let it see too much of her. Rhaenys came after, oilskin shoulders shedding droplets onto the stone as she ducked under the low door. Her eyes were bright with the thin day and a smile that glinted and vanished by degrees. She carried the faint smell of dragon with her, a smell like hot scales and metal. The men in the sept shifted their weight when they came, not from fear. Have men not yet learned to distinguish between the shape of fear and the shape of awe? But from a thing that put the two together and changed them. Argella had been given a cloak, plain heavy wool the color of oak bark. She had put it on herself, and when the time came, she unpinned it with a brusque movement and laid it over the back of the nearest pew, as if to say, "I will be warm enough without it." Her arms were still bare. Perhaps she did not wish to hide the marks. Perhaps she had forgotten them. Perhaps she wanted them seen by her own people, so that when they went back to their halls they could tell their wives and daughters. She stood like that, and they would say, "I would have stood worse, I would have stood groveling, and be ashamed and proud at once." They stood before the altar side by side. Aegon had stood at an altar twice before. The first time, Visenya's hand had been cold and dry in his. She had not trembled, not even in breath, not even when the Septon fumbled the ring and it clicked against stone and rolled away and he bent to get it. The second time, Rhaenys' hand had been warm and had shifted in his once. Lightly, not to pull away but to align her fingers better with his. She carried words inside her, music and chatter, and that movement had said, "These next are your words and my silence. As long as we are speaking the same thing, we mean different things." He had known, even then, there would be days he would want it otherwise and days he would be grateful it was so. Argella's hand was neither warm nor cold. It had callus at the base of the thumb and at the first joint of the fingers, not the soft smoothness of a lady who had done nothing but pass a cup. He had callus in those places as well. Her ring finger had a bruise around it, simple and narrow, as if a ring had been pulled off violently. She did not flinch when he took her hand. She did not press his either. He had the sense he had before a fight when a man sets his feet properly, to say, "We both know the ground is uneven, but here is my balance." The Septon wet his thumb in oil and touched it to their joined hands. "Mother, bless them with mercy," he said, and then hurried to add, "Warrior, bless them with courage." As if to make up for the earlier repetition, Aegon listened as if he were listening to a map being drawn in the wet sand. Knowing it would be come and gone by the next tide, but also knowing that, for a while, it would be true, and men would point to the lines and say, "Here, here, here are the places we must run and the places we must stand." When the vow had been spoken, simply as water speaks to stone in time and not by hurry, He took a cloak from Oris's arm and placed it over Argella's shoulders himself. It was a cloak he had chosen among the best he had. It was red as a hearth when it is banked and black as a furnace when it is empty. When he settled it around her, the wool rasped against the leather of her jerkin. He tied the clasp. The dragon's head worked into the clasp rested just below her throat. He had thought of that when he chose it, and now he thought of a dozen men who would see the placing and decide what it meant. He thought of Visenya seeing it and deciding what it meant, and Rhaenys seeing it and deciding what it meant, and of Argella in the future unfastening it in a room with no wind, leaving it on the back of a chair while she wrote a list of stores to be sent upriver. They kissed because the rite required it. It was a firm, dry meeting of mouths, nothing of ownership or of hunger. He tasted salt, and he knew some of it was the sea and some was the residue of tears and some the simple salt of a body that had kept going though it wanted to lie down. He drew back. Their eyes met, and then they did not. Something had been done, and now there was the doing of all that came after. The feast that followed was made of what had been meant to be siege food, but hunger is the greatest spice and also the greatest judge. It makes the tongue honest. There were loaves of brown bread baked dense and fine as stone. There were turnips stewed with bit of salted pork. There were eels, their meat delicate and faintly sweet, caught at dawn from the rocks below and grilled on iron that had remembered too many fires. There was beer that had been rolled across stone and tasted of stone. There was wine that might have been better if time had been kinder to it, and wine that was good enough to make men look at one another with surprise, their mouths purpled by it. Visenya ate little and drank little and spoke to the castellan about repairs to the eastern wall. Fixing in memory numbers the man did not think she would care to remember. Rhaenys found a boy who could sing the old storm songs and made him sing them one after another until even the men who had despised singing found themselves humming, their voices blending into a drone that was like wind in a shutter and unlike it in its softness. Orys drank as he always drank, slowly and steadily, as if each cup were a sentinel set upon a long wall at even intervals. He spoke with men he had fought against and with men who had never drawn a blade, and by the end of the afternoon they were speaking to him with a directness that surprised them and not him. Aegon ate enough to turn aside questions about whether he was hungry or proud, and he rose from the table at last and walked where the wind came easiest, to the upper ward where you could see the sea and the sea could see you. He found her there. She had taken the cloak off. It hung now on a rusted hook driven into the wall where once a pennant rope had been moored. She stood with her hands braced on the parapet and her elbows locked, leaning into the wind the way a man leans into a hard piece of work. Her hair had come half loose and the escaped strands snapped. If she heard him come, she gave no sign. No one in the yard troubled them. "You said you would not take the dignity of my line," she said without turning. Her voice did not fight the wind. It went with it, like a leaf choosing its fall. "And yet the men below have called me queen 5 times, and they have called me princess only 3. One of those men was my father's steward from Rainhouse, and one was a knight whose father died at the last storm. I am counting, you see. I am counting what I lose. It is what one does when the counting is all there is." "You have the counting bone," he said. "Better to have it than not. If you keep it, you will live long when softer women would be dead from the softness." "My softness is all cut away," she said, and one of her hands, those hands again, shifted on the stone and then stilled. "Perhaps there is too little that is not bone. I will tell you a thing," he said. "When I was a boy, my mother took me down the worn stairs in the oldest tower on Dragonstone, down to the place where the old Valyrians had carved the floor to look like molten rock. In the carvings, the rock had their shapes inside it, men and women and the carcasses of beasts, and you could not tell where one ended and one began. She told me, this was made when there were no iron tools here, when the men who lived here had only fire and the patience to let it eat. She told me, do not be proud of the fire. Any fool can burn. Be proud of what you carve from it." She shifted, impatience maybe, or perhaps surprise. "Do you tell all your wives such parables when the feast is done?" she asked without heat. "Only those who stand in the wind," he said. "The ones who love the warm corners have no need of it." She looked over her shoulder then. The wind pushed her hair across her cheek, and she did not brush it away. She had eyes the color of pale amber with dirt in it. Eyes a man could not hardly see the pupils in under this light. And in that moment he felt a little of what it must have been like to be her father and take his pride in this daughter, and then have to carry the weight of his pride onto a field and see that pride go up into ash. He did not forgive him, but he understood the weight. That was different. "Will you bed me in Dragonstone?" she asked, blunt, practical. "Or will I keep this cold?" She tapped with one finger the stone and made a small, sharp sound, like a pebble hitting water. "When the weather eases," he said. "I do not fly Drago, and in winds that blow like this for the sake of vanity. I have no desire to make widows of the men foolish enough to follow me into such gusts just to prove I am not afraid. We will have time here to begin what we must." "You have wives," she said again. "Does your other wife hate your first? And will your third be kindly to both? I will not simper into a corner for either." "You will not," he said. "I would not want you if you did. Visenya will not hate you. She does not spend her hate on women. She keeps it for weak men and treachery and mold in the damp. She will not love you either, I think. She has her own reckonings. Rhaenys will like you if you tell her a story you truly believe. She loves people for their believing. She will like you less if you pretend to have one when you do not. And you," she said, "what do you love and hate?" "I love stone that will be shaped," he said, and then he added, because there was no point leaving it to be guessed. "And I love the people who will shape it beside me. I hate very little. I have not had time to practice hatred into skill." She frowned slightly. "You are not what I had pictured," she said. "You speak like a man who has spent his life listening to craftsmen arguing over where to lay the next course, and not like a man who brought fire down on a tower full of bad men and good men alike." "I have been both things," he said. They did not speak for a while. The sea spoke, and the wind spoke, and the gulls quarreled like washerwomen in a courtyard. The sound of hammers came thin from the far wall. "You will give me those men," she said abruptly. "The ones who bound me and delivered me. You said so. I will not let them die quickly." "I said so," he agreed. "And you will sit in judgment. But do not make it a show. Do not keep it long. The people who see their lord linger over cruelty learn cruelty as a language. And in half a year you will not know what you hear in the market." She took that in. "You speak as if you knew markets," she said. "I know markets," he said, and thought of the times he and Orys had gone to buy fish with copper a steward pretended to think was their father's coin, and how the fishwife had weighed the fish on a scale that had been trued by the simple expedient of hurling a stone through the window of the steward who decided to clip coins and thereby give her short measure. He smiled, but only a very little and inside. "Very well," she said. "Then we will do first the small justice and then the large. I will have the men, and then I will send letters. The lords who did not betray me will be first to swear to our rule. The lords who did will follow if they wish to keep their sons from being fostered on a bare island with nothing but gulls to teach them anything. Name your fosterings carefully," he said. "You can outlaw a man only once. If you do it twice to the same man by mistake, you will look a fool and he will be a danger." She gave a sound that might have been almost a laugh and might have been only air in her throat. "Do I look a fool?" she asked. "No," he said. Her shoulders eased by a hair. They were interrupted by a boy running up the steps with a letter in a clean hand and a face that had not learned when to be careful. He had Rhaenys' bright look about him, one of hers, then, or one of those who wished to be hers. He bowed too low and betrayed, in the doing, that the bow was new to him and recently rehearsed. "Your Grace," he said, and then, reddening, "Your Graces," as he realized what his own carelessness had made him forget. "A raven from Old Town." Aegon took the letter and broke its seal. The wax was blue-green like the sea when it goes deep, and the seal was a 7-pointed star. The High Septon's words were not angry. They were sorrowful the way a man is when he wishes to tell you that your choice has saddened him and shamed your forebears. He had chosen his scribe well. The letter did not speak of sin. It spoke of order and the need for one wife to be a cornerstone for a house and for a people. It spoke of the confusion of children and the envy of wives and the example set for men with no dragons and no castles of their own. It did not threaten. It warned. And it asked, no, it begged, that Aegon, the first of his name, refrained from making a scar upon the Seven's face by wedding a third. He read it twice. He read it a third time with his lips moving, which he did sometimes with a letter that had more than one meaning in it. Then he folded it cleanly and slid it into his belt. Another parley, Argella said, watching his face and not his hands. She had that cunning, then. She looked where the truth lived. With a man who thinks himself an ally, Aegon said. And is he wrong? He is wrong to think he is necessary, Aegon said, no fiercer than before, no less. She took a breath and let it go, and if he had been a different man he might have taken that breath for him. A sign that she had decided what he must do because he was to be hers as well as his own. But he was what he was, and what he saw was that she had decided in herself only what she would or would not be ashamed to stand beside when letters were written about them after they were dead. You will answer him, she said. I will, he said, with words that say, I hear you, and with deeds that say, I hear you less than I hear the wind in this place. She nodded. Then we will do what we said. We will make justice first, quick and clean for those who cannot be made clean by any words. And then we will send the letters and sit which lords come and which do not. Which will you summon first? He asked. He was not testing her. He wanted to hear the list that would tell him the shape of her Stormlands. Fell, she said at once. Cairn, Tarth, Estermont, Dondarrion. The wilds are learned and think they are too clever for their own blood. I will make them come last so they have time to compose something they think sharp. The swans? The swans I will send to as if they had never looked at another man when we needed them, because they hold the bridge of the marches with their name, and names are bridges as good as stone in such places. The Morrigens I will ask as if I were asking my old aunt to supper. They will like that. He smiled then, openly, for the first time, because the names and the ways to hold them had come quick and sure. You are as I hoped, he said. I am as I am, she said, with no pride in the words, and turned then to look full on him. And you are as I did not dare hope. You are not kind, but you are, what is the word? Steady, he said. She nodded again. Yes. He left her there and went to find Orys. He found him in a small room off the kitchens where cut wood was stacked to dry. The smell of it was clean and sweet. In that place, for a moment, the sea did not get to breathe. Orys sat on a barrel with his back against the wall and his cup on his knee. He looked at the cup as if it held the past and the present and a little of the future, all in the same dark red. She is brave, Orys said without preface, as a man might say, it will rain, and the other man will look up out of habit and agree. She is, Aegon said. And you have taken her from me? Orys said. And when he lifted his eyes, they were the same as they had been the day a fish had shone silver in the surf, and a boy had shouted and the man beside him had laughed. I am loyal. I will go on being so. My veins can carry it. But do not call me less sore than I am. I wanted that storm. It was meant to fall on me. Aegon inclined his head. It was the smallest acknowledgement he could make that would not be an insult. I know, he said. I know what I have taken. I know what I have given as well. You will give me something else to carry, Orys said. He did not make it a question. I will, Aegon said. Not the Stormlands. They are hers, and they will be hers even if the sons she bears me carry my hair and your temper. But there is a rock where the river splits and a ford where the stones lie like teeth, and on that ford men will come and go for 300 years, and they will pay someone to keep them from drowning on days when the river pretends to be a sea. You will build there with me. You will raise a hall on mud and pride and the river's humor. And you will hold the line that keeps the reach honest and the vale thoughtful and the north reminded that even a wolf drowns if it forgets to swim. Orys' mouth pulled into a shape that had been there 100 times before when he had a hard thing he could grip and lift. I will, he said. You have always known where to set me. Sometimes I have not loved the place, but I have gone to it. I will go to this one. And in the going, I will make what I would have made with the storm. It will be different. It will be mine. He stood. They gripped each other by the forearms, the way they had done a dozen times upon landing and after battles and in hallways where men were watching. Their hands were hard together. They let go at the same moment, both used to the timing. "What will you say to Visenya?" Orys asked. He asked it not because he feared the answer, but because it amused him to imagine it. "I will say what I say to her when the forge fire is low," Aegon said. "I will say, add oil, add air, and then stand back." "And to Rhaenys?" Orys asked. "I will say, we will make songs, but quickly and not too sweet. The wind here will scatter sweetness before it can sit on the tongue." "To the High Septon?" Orys' grin showed teeth like a hound's. Aegon took the letter from his belt and set it on the barrel and put his hand on it for a moment. "I will say, there is room in this land for 7 gods and for 3 wives," he said. "I will say, if there is not room in your heart for both, you may keep your heart where it is, and I will keep my wives where they are. I will say, I am carving a house, and when it is done, you may come and bless it, or you may come and curse it. It will stand either way." Orys laughed then, a quiet laugh that could have been a cough in that place. "You will make them dizzy," he said. "I will make them steady," Aegon said, and realized, as he said it, that he had found the word and would not put it down again. In the days that followed, the wind did not stop, but it shifted its arm. It became not exactly kinder, but less intent upon the immediate toppling of towers. In that turning, things began to be done. The men who had dragged their lady out of her hall bound like meat came to the yard with their hands tied behind them and their mouths gagged because of the Castellan's mercy. They stood hunched, their pride having the shape of boys who had been caught in a lie, and Argella stood before them with a rope in her hand. A simple rope such as a farmer uses to bring a stubborn donkey to the plow. She did not tie it on any man. She dropped it on the ground and said, "If you would have bound me, bind yourselves and show me how you do your knots. Else hold your mouths open." One of them made the mistake of looking to the men arrayed along the yard for rescue. He met hard eyes. No one wanted to be the man who saved a man who had done that. They bound themselves, clumsy. She watched. Aegon watched her watching. When they were bound, she took the knife that had cut her and held it up. The knife had a notch in the blade and a curl of leather still clinging to the hilt where the man who used it had grazed something he had not meant to graze. She said, "I will not draw it. You will bite it, each of you. Then you will spit blood onto the ground you were born on. Remember it tastes of salt. Remember." They drew the blade between their teeth. They spat. She gave orders. 3 were hanged from the Lowers Ward's gallows on ropes that had not been used since the last winter, and the smell of dry hemp when it is stretched fast was like the smell of old straw gone to dust. 2 were sent to the kitchens because their crimes had been less their idea than their weakness. She said to them, "You will feed those whose faces you were glad to see when you dragged me by my hair. Perhaps in time your hands will learn how to hold good things." And one she sent to be scourged and then sent away down the coast with a bag of coin that was not generous. "You will learn to fish far from here," she said to him. "And if you are wise, you will never come where men remember your face." The letters went out. They went in boats and on the backs of men with good knees. They went in the pockets of selling women and the sleeves of septons. The words were not long and not grand. They said, "Your liege asks for you." They said, "The storm broke and left a woman and a man standing in its wake. And if you would live in that wake, you must come and say the words you would have said if your father had lived." They said, "The king is here." They said, "We remember." Aegon's guard made a habit of the wall walks. They learned which storms drove most under the threshold and which made torches impossible. They learned the nooks in which gulls made nests so that eggs could be taken and eaten raw by boys who had not had enough of anything for a very long time. They learned how to keep their feet on a stone made treacherous by a fine green slickness that could not be seen until it was too late. Withrow found a seam in the stone where water collected and encouraged a growth like fine hairs. He cut the threads of it and warned the masons. Little by little, the walls of Storm's End grew used to their new owners, not in love or in hatred, but in that slow way stone has of being held and holding. Men slept in rooms that had last been used by men who had hated them, and their dreams were no different. Visenya and Argella walked the wall together once. Those who saw them did not pretend they had not. Their faces were set. They spoke less than 20 words between them, and when they parted, each bowed her head the smallest amount. There would be no sweetness to that relationship. There would be no sabotage either, not unless the ground changed. Aegon took the measure of it and was content. Contentment in a king's mind is a shelf, not a bed. He set things on it and reached for them when he needed them. Rhaenys, who had found the boy with the storm songs, found also that the boy's mother had a throat that made flower light when she sang. She came to the kitchens and sang while she kneaded, soft as flour, and the women there became queens for an hour, and the men who came to snatch crusts became princes, just in their own hands. Rhaenys went out to the small dock under the cliff and watched Meraxes send gulls flaring and cursing into the gray, and the old fishers came and sat with her and laughed when she asked them to teach her how to mend a net. They taught her anyway. She bound the cords ill and her fingers bled a little, and she sucked at the blood and said, "The sea does not mind." And the old men loved her the way a man loves a thing that does not pretend not to be itself. The first lord to come was a man with a narrow face and a banner that had been repaired just enough to show that the repair was a choice, not a necessity. Fell. He knelt awkwardly, one knee, then the other, and his sword rattled on the flagstones. His wife, who came behind him with a face like pale bread and eyes like flint, took her son by the ear when he would have swung his feet at the pew's leg. Aegon watched Argella watching these small things. The wife's hand, the boy's dangling ankle, the too careful darning of the banner. He said names, and the names made a shape in the air a man could almost see. Karen came next, a man whose beard had been trimmed too close, as if he had taken the blade to it himself. He had eyes that watched his own hands. He swore with his head low and rose with his eyes quick at the edges. Estermont came in a rain squall, his cloak dripping and his hair like dark seaweed laid flat on his head. He smelled of mussel shells. He embraced Argella like a girl he remembered climbing trees with and called her by a nickname that no one else had permission for. She endured it for 3 breaths and then leaned into it 1/4 of an inch and smiled with one corner of her mouth. Tarth came with good horses and clear-eyed men who were square in the shoulders and too proud in the tilt of their heads. Dondarrion came as if he had been walking since dawn, which he had. His cloak did not reach over his large hands, and he made a joke about thunder that was not very funny but was true. The swans came last and bowed first, and Aegon saw Argella's hands twitch and then cease to twitch. She let them bow long enough to feel the stone in their knees. Then she raised them and returned them their names as if nothing had ever come between. When they left the hall, their faces shone with relief at a reprieve they would work the rest of their lives to deserve. That is a good bargain, Aegon thought. Carefully given mercy breeds zeal. At night, when the torches guttered and the sea made itself known not by its sight but by the way it moved the air in your lungs, Aegon and Argella learned the shape of the talk they could make together. They did not talk of gentler childhoods. There had been not many gentle places for either of them. They spoke of the taste of salt and the way it took root in almost everything after a while and made men imagine they tasted blood when they did not. They spoke of the weight of a boot on a stair and how one tells by ear whether the man is tired or drunk. They spoke, soft, of the place where one's shoulder aches after holding a shield too long, and of how to curl one's fingers under when gripping a blade so that a cut does not open a man's own tendons. They spoke, sometimes, of children. They did not speak then of how many or what they would be named. They spoke of what it meant to be born under a thunderhead that never quite went away, and of how those born in such air had lungs that learned how to fill full anyway. There was a night when it rained so hard that even the rain lost patience with itself and came down in sheets that tore when the wind took them. The torches went out in the lower yard, and a woman cried in the hall because her babe had started having trouble breathing when the weather turned, and the midwife was on a different ward. Argella was up and moving in a breath. Aegon, waking from a thin sleep, saw her tie the cloak blind and go, and he went after, and together they went out into the wet like a single beast with 4 legs. They found the midwife and found the child and saw it through. The child was not anything of theirs, but in the morning the smell of hot milk in a pan was like worship. When the wind eased further and the day held its light in the sky more firmly, they went down to the black beach. Balerion lay there with his vast head turned so that his left eye, which was as large as a small shield, looked past them as much as at them. He disliked focusing too closely on small things unless they burned. He recognized their smell. He breathed out a breath that stirred the pebbles and sent gulls shrieking and lifted Argella's hair all at once, as if a hand had come down upon her head and ruffled it not unkindly. She did not step back, though she swayed, and Aegon set his hand, fingers spread, at the small of her back, more to show her where she might lean if she wished than to keep her from falling. "He is like a mountain," she said, or perhaps she shouted. The wind took her words and made a song of them. "He is older than any mountain I have climbed," Aegon said. She approached to the distance he had indicated and stopped. She lifted her hand, slowly, and let it hang there. Balerion did not blink. In the black of his eye, a small pale shape like a fish darted. Dawn had come, and it printed itself there. She lowered her hand and did not touch him. He believed she could have. He did not think it would have been wise. "The gods of my father's hall were said to be the sea and the wind," she said. "But they never felt like this. Gods shape themselves to be eaten by men," Aegon said. "Dragons are dragons." She looked at him then, hair in her eyes and on her mouth. She smiled, full now, teeth showing. "Yes," she said, gust within gust. "Yes." When at last they flew, it was an afternoon that belonged to early summer in a place that does not trust it. The air was tepid as broth left too long on a hearth. The color of the sea was the color of iron left to weather. The small figure that was Storm's End fell away, and the line of the coast unspooled like a thread of dark wool. She sat before him on the saddle because he had not the time to have another made, and because he did not wish to give her a single handhold to clutch until she found her own. When Balerion took the sky, there was a moment where her body forgot it had weight. He felt it in the bracing of her thighs and the way her breath stopped and then went on. He put his hand low on the belt around her waist where it came across the bone of her hip and locked, and his fingers found that notch of bone and stayed there. She did not lean back into him. She leaned into the forward pull, like a woman on a fast horse or a man who had learned to row against a quick tide. When they came down, after they had gone out far enough that even brave men would not readily swim it, she sat a long while after dismounting with her eyes on the horizon and her hand on the strap of her scabbard, as if the strap were the only thing she owned that kept the future from spilling at her feet. "You understand now why men tell lies about us," he said, quiet, not to thrust it upon her but to make a place where it could be spoken. "Yes," she said. "If I had seen that and had no words for it, I would make some up." They climbed the path and went back into the stone belly of the castle, where men were doing useful tasks and had soot on their faces and looked up when they passed. A man who was sweeping sand from a seam in the floor bowed with the broom in his hand. The angle of his body said, "I know what a broom is. I know what a king is. I think it might be that in one life I would be happier being the broom, but I will be the man now and not break." In the evenings, small disputes came and were settled. A woman who had been washing clothes for officers and had been used for touching more than wash asked for redress. Argella sat her before the table and made the man apologize in words the woman chose, and the words were not polite and they were not obscene. They were exact as a measure. A man who had built barrels asked for payment that had not been given. The steward had the money and said he had been saving it until the question of a levy was resolved. "Give it now," Aegon said, and to the steward he added, "Hold back your levy from me if you must hold it from someone." The steward swallowed and bowed, and then went away and had a drop of wine in private to oil his anger. Later, he found that he was less angry than he had meant to be. There were dozens of such small things each day. That was the work he had known he would find here and the work he loved. Dragons burn and awe. Kingship is in the steady hand upon a scale. The day came when a letter arrived from the Reach with a ribbon the color of wine. It bore doxies dressed as roses and obligations dressed as friendship. Aegon read it and smiled without humor and folded it and set it aside. Another came from the Vale, crisp as a frost morning, speaking of honor in a way that was sweetly distant from battle. He read that one too and answered it with a map that showed a road he meant to build and a bridge he meant to hold. A third came from the Riverlands, breathing as if it had been written running. He sent for Oris and put that one in his hand and said, "Here is our ford." Oris took it and grinned wolfish and set his shoulders to an invisible yoke and left the hall with a stride Aegon had never been able to learn to imitate without also borrowing Oris' soul. Argella began to walk through the town below the castle twice each week, with 2 guards and a maid who had been with her since childhood and who had a scar down her forearm, bright as new skin, commemorating the time she had put her arm through a glass window to reach a baby that had been choking on a nut. The maid had a mouth always half open, as if she had a word on her tongue and might at any time remember what it was. Argella listened. She did not bestow coins like rain. She made notes about roofing that would not last the winter. She told a man who had built a new storeroom without leaving an air channel that he would have rats until he tore it down and began again. He swore under his breath that she was priggish and later did exactly as she said. The next spring he did not have rats, and he said the queen had witchcraft. In the summer he said the queen had sense. He could not decide which he admired more. Rhaenys, after a night of rain and laughter, caught Argella's wrist in the hall and turned it to look once more at the scars of rope. She did it with no permission asked and no apology given. Argella did not snatch her arm away. Rhaenys traced, with the gathered edge of her finger, the path of white and pink. "These will never go," she said softly, not as a lament but as a finding. "Even when you are old, you will put your hands into warm water and see them like fish at the bottom of a clear pond. And remember." "I am glad," Argella said calmly. "I had thought no one would ever like anything about them." "I like," Rhaenys said, and looked up with that sudden flash of light in her that had nothing to do with the room. "I like that when you put your hands on this land, you will remember the feel of rope. It will keep your fingers honest." Argella was still. Then she nodded. "Yes," she said. "That is the best thing anyone has said to me since we married." "Since we married," Rhaenys echoed as if tasting the words. Then, with a small shrug, she kissed Argella's cheek lightly where the skin had tautness in it, a younger woman's did not, and she said, "We will sit and tell stories on better days. I have one about a hammock and a pile of oranges that will make you fall down." She moved away like a seam opening in silk, and men around them blinked because they had thought they were watching something sharp and had suddenly not been needed. Visenya, who had little patience for such softness, came later to Argella with a list of men who could be trusted to stand in a line and keep it under arrow fire. "I have no liking for any of them," she said, "but they will not run and take another with them when they should run alone." Argella looked at the names as if she were reading a recipe for a bread she had never yet made. "These 3 I know," she said. "These 2 I do not. This one I would have called a drunkard. If he will stand, perhaps I have misseen him." Visenya said, "He is a drunkard. He stands anyway." And the 2 women gave one another a look that was not friendship but had in it a recognition that each possessed a scale in her mind that weighed men without lying. The High Septon answered Aegon's letter with one of his own that was longer and more careful. He spoke of a bridging, then, of a house with many rooms but only one hearth and a master who must not pretend a hearth can be 3 friends sitting in their separate rooms with fireflies in jars. Aegon smiled at the image and folded the letter and sent a man to Old Town with a simple reply. On a day named, the king would come. He took Visenya and Rhaenys with him. He did not take Argella. He did not ask, he told her he would not. She nodded, the faintest drawing together at the corner of her mouth at odds with the ease in her shoulders, and said calmly, "You do not bring storms to a place where men make candles." He said, "No," and left her with Storm's End and men to swear in her hall. In Old Town the bells rang and the smoke went up in ribbons sweeter smelling than most smoke. And men gave him room and tried to give him their spines too. The High Septon set his round, soft hand on Aegon's and said words he had rehearsed. Aegon said words he had not rehearsed and meant. He said, "I will keep my wives and I will keep your blessing that I may keep your people in my peace." The High Septon looked at him and looked at the women flanking him and then, slow as a man who has to set his foot down onto a stair he cannot see, nodded. "You will have it," he said. In the sept that hour, a blind girl sang the old hymn to the mother that was only 3 notes, and when she came to the second note and made it true, old women in the back began to cry. Rhaenys put her hand into Aegon's and smiled, very slightly. Visenya looked straight ahead and thought of water and oil and how to keep each where it belonged. Back upon the bluff, the storms moved on their tracks as they had before men named them. The sea rose and fell, the long thud that had been the drum of Aegon's first nights there turning into a rhythm he no longer had to think his heartbeat different from. The carved stones of Storm's End took the sun 1 hour for every 3 days they refused it, and when they took it, they held it, warming like beasts. Argella, who would never be soft, learned to walk the halls as if the stone were her second skin. When a woman's monthlies left her weak and she sat late with a cup of plain hot water because wine would make her lightheaded, she laughed when Rhaenys told a story about oranges in a hammock and her legs tangled. The laugh cut in her throat and came out rough, and it was better than a smoother one. Later, when messengers began to come with word of upriver troubles and of hard-eyed men in mailed shirts buying grain with coins that had the W.R. Ong King's face on them, Aegon and Orys took counsel and made lists and made pacts and kissed those who gathered at the gate without sentiment that showed. Argella stood on the wall with her cloak's dragon clasp resting just beneath her throat and watched them go. And the wind came from the sea, and the smell of salt and iron laid itself on the back of her tongue and stayed. After, with the men gone, storms are different. The same rain falls, but it sounds of waiting. The same gulls call, but they are lonelier. She walked and counted. She counted the sacks of barley in the store. She counted the candles that had failed and the ones that burned well. She counted the number of times she had to tell a boy to take his boots off his feet before he came into the chapel with a broom. She wrote letters and sealed them with wax and learned to press the seal with the same pressure each time, so that the dragon's head was perfect and not smudged. She held court and let small folk tell her that their neighbor's pig had eaten their cabbages, and that their husband had lied to them with a bottle. And she dispensed cabbages and bottles and a night on the floor and words to be said before bed. When night came and sleep did not, she stood on the wall and listened to the wind moving through holes in stone as through a flute and tried to hear what song the wind believed it was making. The Stormlord's widow came once, a woman who had not forgiven the world for making her older than the man who had put his seed in her. She came full of angles, as if every bone under her skin had sharpened out of grief. She spoke without courtesy and without fear and said, "My son will not kneel." As if it were weather, Argella took her to the parapet and showed her the line of the sea and named to her the ships that could be seen. That one, Estermonts. That one, a trader out of Spicetown. That one, an up-coast sloop that would never have put in here if it did not know to whom it owed tax. "Your son need not kneel," Argella said. "He will come and bow his head, or he will send another to do it with his name. Men are bones with names. The shape does not change. He will call a bow a bend and go home and sit at table with you. Or he will not bend, and then he will quicken our day. I do not mind which." The widow went away, and when she came back, she brought her son by the ear and made him kneel too hard. He rose with dust on his knee and hatred in his mouth, and none of it mattered when he signed his name to a paper that said, "I live here." There was a morning when the air was like boats dried in the sun, light and blunt, that a raven came with a ribbon burned on its edge. Argella took it with 2 fingers. She read and her throat worked. She handed it to the castellan. The castellan read and did not look up for a long time. Then he said simply, "We will pour wine," and he was already moving. The words had told of men at the ford and men in the trees and how the river had been made to do what a river never does: stand. It had told of a fierce bright thing that had laid itself like an eye over the field, and of thunder that had not come from sky. It had told, at last, that Orys had gone down and had risen and had gone down again and had not risen the second time for longer than a man who could be called alive, and that when he had risen at last, he had risen without half the use of his left side and with pain drawn between the brows like a thread pulled too hard. It had told that Aegon still stood and that the ford was theirs. Argella stood holding the stone of the window and did not feel its cold. She did not weep. She went and poured wine and spoke the names of the men who had died whose names she knew and those she did not. And when the castellan, who had served her father and had not known how to love this new shape for his service, looked at her and faltered, She set the wine for him with the steadiness of a hand laying a blade on a whetstone. Later, when the hall was quiet, she went to the place where the rope her father had taught her to braid as a girl still hung from a hook, and she put her hand around it and squeezed hard and let the burn raise in her palm, and when the burn had raised enough hurt, she let it go. When men came back, it was as if the sea had given up a dozen drowned and made them men again. They came in broken, and some with their faces skinned, and some with arms in slings that would not hold anything heavier than a spoon for months. Aegon came, and he walked evenly, and he leaned only when he was alone and let a bar of wood take some of his weight for a breath he would not share. She saw it. She went to him and did not speak, and he did not speak, and they stood there in the dark of the small room where cut wood dried and breathed together. She said, after a long time, "Ours is the fury," half mocking, half not. He said, "Fire and blood," as if he were stating the words of a prayer, because prayer can sometimes be a way to count your breaths. They did not kiss. They did not need to. Orys came later, brought under a canvas that did less to keep him dry than to make him look like a barge in a storm. He was half himself and all himself, a man who had lost a measure and found another. He laughed the laugh of a man who had to picture laughter in order to make it come and who succeeded anyway. He said, "I can still drink with my right hand," and men cheered because they wanted him to have a victory he could hold up. He sat at the end of a table and learned how to use his left foot again as a thing that did not know it was his, and he made the room ring with a joke about it he would have despised before. He took papers in his right hand and made marks as he had always done, and it was only later, when no one was looking, that he let the pen rest a little longer than he had used to because his shoulder had begun to ache in his sleep. When he saw Argella, he kissed her hand like a relic and did not for an ins. "Tan't make it smaller than that." She bent and kissed his brow, slow. Summer, such as it is in a place that keeps its storms nearby, set its hand upon the land. Children ran without cloaks and were muddy. Bread rose better. Aegon stood one afternoon on the wall with his head bare and his hair pushed back, and Rhaenys came, her mouth already open to tell him a thing, and she stopped with her mouth still open because she had seen that he was watching two boys playing at swords in the yard, and they were taking turns at falling down. He watched them as if they were the center of a map and said, "They have taught themselves to pretend to die. They will be made men by how they choose to pretend. Choose men who are good at pretending to make men." Rhaenys closed her mouth and opened it again and said the thing she had come to say, which was frivolous and much needed, and they laughed, and then the map of the yard returned, and he watched its roads. From the east, letters came in a hand that belonged to a man who thought he had taught himself humility but had in truth only learned to make it into a show. From the west, a merchant sent a chest that had ribs of shell and smelled of cinnamon. From the north, no letter came at all, and that was the letter the north always sent. He put them where he put them in himself and went on. Argella's belly grew, then did not grow. For a few weeks she was nauseated in the mornings, and she would sit with her head in her hands until the smell of the world made sense again. Then the blood came and took what it had not yet given, and she bled and went pale and gripped the edge of the basin and breathed through her nose for a long time until breathing was just breathing again. She did not speak of it except to say, "Not this one." He understood. He did not say aloud that he had half not wanted her to quicken yet, because he had seen how men wrote their names on sons and then hated sons for being their names. When a later quiet settled and she lay with her head in his lap, eyes closed, he smoothed the hair back from her damp brow and counted silently, not numbers but steadiness, as if by counting he could make it remain. All the while, in the rooms at the heart of the castle where the wall was thickest, where the wind's song sounded like breath in a sleeping beast, plans grew like moss. Slow and not much to look at from day to day, but if one stopped and looked after a season, the place was transformed. Roads were drawn on parchment. The weight of carts was calculated by men who had counted sacks of barley with Argella and had learned to write down each bag between the coming and the going. A list of harbor rocks dangerous at low tide was made and sent from cove to cove until it came back weighted with notes in half a dozen hands. A decree went out, short as a curse and as memorably phrased, that men who beat their wives would be given to the wives' brothers, if there were brothers, or to the Queen's Guard, if there were not, for a beating under law, but only once. If the beating came again, there would be no second law. Men learned the shape of that line and did not cross it lightly. The storms came as they do. A egret stood once in a puddle in the yard, shaking one leg and then the other as if to remind itself which was which. Aegon watched it with a faint smile that did not travel to his mouth, and Argella watched his watching, and their shoulders touched, and the small warmth of that touch stood against the weather not like a fire but like a hand held inside a sleeve. When the first snow of the year fell, a thin, sorry thing like dandruff on a cloak, the boys in the yard ran with their tongues out to catch it, and then, disappointed, turned to their chores. The women in the kitchens opened the door for a moment and let the cold come in and squealed and slammed it shut, and then opened it again. The Septon wrote in his cluttered hand a note to a friend in Old Town that said, "The king's third wife is a storm, but a storm that waters crops, not one that breaks trees." He sealed it and sent it, and the bird took odd ages to find its way, and by the time it did, other storms had blown and that sentence arrived like a forgotten drinking song. There would be more letters. There would be battles whose names had not yet found themselves. There would be sons and daughters and the upturning of cups on tables and the spilling of wine that men would later pretend had been a sign. There would be nights when Aegon could not sleep because the drum of the sea and the beat of his heart had found a way to go together and would not part, and nights when he slept so deeply a messenger with a torch would have stood at his bed for a full minute before with great reluctance touching his shoulder. There would be a winter in which Storm's End housed more than its share of hungry men and women, and Argella would come out of that winter thinner and more lightly sleeping and more dangerous to those who lied in her hall. There would be a summer in which the air turned to iron and a child died because lungs sometimes do when air forgets how to carry them. There would be the years in which the High Septon would kiss the ring of a king who had 3 wives, and the steep slow learning of any land when new laws meet old mud. For now, there was a steadying. There was the small sound of a pen across parchment in the night, when men had gone to their beds. There was a dragon asleep and a tide making and unmaking the edge of a world. There were hands that had known rope and now knew paper, and paper that would one day become law. There were 3 women whose names would be said together or apart depending upon the speaker's mood and need, and a man whose hand on a scale did not tremble. There was the sound, so small that only those who leaned close could hear, of a house shaping itself from fire, from fury, from stones that would not be moved and from a marriage made under glass colored by the sea. And there was wind, always wind, tasting of salt and iron, moving through holes in stone and making a song that might be mistaken, if one were young, for anger, and if one were older, for breath.